Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Israel. The former president of Ukraine is a fugitive from justice today. The country's interim government issued an arrest warrant for Viktor Yanukovych after the mass killings of civilian protesters last week. Yanukovych fled the capital Saturday and is reportedly hiding out in eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, in Kiev Sunday, protesters did not celebrate victory but mourned the victims. George Thomas is there.
Many of you today probably feel the same as I do. There are a lot of tears in our hearts.
At one of Kiev's largest evangelical churches, Pastor Anatoly Kaluzhny tries to comfort a grieving congregation.
To be honest, I am not euphoric. My heart is aching because our nation has paid a big price in blood.
Ukrainians have been mourning the more than 100 people killed in clashes between riot police and protesters. And that sadness settles over a country facing dramatic political changes. After 3 months of protests, anti-government demonstrators are now in power. On Saturday, Ukraine's parliament stunned the nation by voting overwhelmingly to impeach President Viktor Yanukovych, who then fled the capital city. Hours later, members of parliament picked Alexander Turchinov, a prominent evangelical Christian, as interim president until new elections in May.
Christians were praying on Independence Square. We were praying in our churches. People around the world were praying for us, and God did a miracle. Ukraine is a new country.
And to give you a sense of just how dramatic the changes have been, a few days ago, this entire street was completely filled by the so-called Ukrainian Berkut, the police. Today, you have dozens of men. You can take a look all the way down. These are ordinary folks who have taken up position in front of the parliament. What happens next is very uncertain. As lawmakers scramble to put together a coalition government, skepticism abounds. That includes former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, free after spending the last 30 months in prison.
We need to totally change the government. We need a whole new set of leaders. We don't need the rich oligarchs back in power. They need to go.
Ukraine's neighbor, Russia, closely watches the changes. It has huge economic ties here, and President Vladimir Putin has publicly talked about bringing Ukraine back into its political orbit. The protesters instead want closer ties with Europe. On Sunday, America warned Russia not to even think about sending troops into Ukraine. Back at Pastor Kaluzhny's church, a plea for reconciliation after months of turmoil.
We need to unite because the society is divided east and west, north and south. We need to come together and make very important decisions in the days ahead.
And George Thomas joins us now from Kiev. George, what happens in the days ahead?
Look, everybody wants to know where in the world is Viktor Yanukovych. There's an arrest warrant for him to be apprehended. People are very concerned. Obviously, you know, the big thing is we're hearing reports of pro-Yanukovych demonstrations, especially in the eastern part of the country. To see if that spreads or even gets bigger, we will wait and watch in the days ahead.
Well, the Olympics have wrapped up now. Are there concerns that Russia might get involved?
Look, that's the big question here in the country. Everybody wants to know, how will Russia respond today? The foreign ministry in Moscow said they were furious at the parliament's decision to impeach the sitting president. In fact, Russia has withdrawn, has recalled its ambassador to Ukraine for further consultations to figure out what on earth is going. No doubt about it. From Kremlin's perspective, this was a huge political blow. You have to realize Vladimir Putin has always had big aspirations. In fact, he calls Ukraine Little Russia. So he has always wanted to extend his political orbit to include this nation.
So what can you tell us about this interim president who is an evangelical Christian, correct?
Yeah, he is very well known. He's a Baptist pastor, a prominent Christian leader in the country, serves under Yulia Tymoshenko, has been a close confidant over the years, and really has, in some ways, played the mouthpiece for her in the last 30 months. It's a big deal for him to be elected the interim president. That lasts till May 25th, when the new set of elections take place.
Real quickly, what can you tell us about Tymoshenko?
You know, I mean, it was interesting because we were on Maidan when actually we just missed her when she arrived on stage. But you know, we've had a chance to meet with some of the protesters, and they're saying, listen, we need a whole new crop of leaders. They want young leaders. They don't want the Tymoshenkos. They want a new crop of leaders, and they're saying there's so many of those on the streets of Kiev. Those who were demonstrating for the last 3 months, they're saying there are young leaders. They need fresh blood, new faces that can bring this country into the new area.
All right, George Thomas on the ground in Kiev. Thank you so much, George.
You're welcome.
While the world has been focused on the Ukraine, another national rebellion with big implications is raging in Venezuela. Dale Hurd has the story.
It's been 13 straight days of violent clashes in Venezuela. On one side, pro-democracy forces, many of them students and the middle class. And on the other side, police and pro-government groups, Chavistas as they're called, followers of the party of anti-American President Hugo Chavez, who died of cancer last year. Why are Venezuelans so fed up? A lot of reasons. A disastrously mismanaged economy with soaring inflation and shortages of basic goods. Terrible crime and political repression under Chavez's successor, Nicolas Maduro. Venezuelans abroad are protesting against the government too, in Florida and California, and in Panama, where CBN's Chuck Holton talked to some of them.
Here in Panama City, Panama, there are tens of thousands of Venezuelan expatriates, many of whom are here today, joining in solidarity with their countrymen back in Venezuela.
Beyond all of the basic needs that we have in Venezuela, we just don't want communism in Venezuela. This is a matter of people trying to feed their kids, people being afraid of go out to the streets and being shot.
I have my mother and brothers in Venezuela. They're having a very bad time over there. They're really horrified of what's happening over there.
In Caracas, opposition leader Enrique Capriles told President Maduro, "I will not accept, nor will anyone here, that Venezuelans who think differently are fascists. Take those words and put them you-know-where." There has been growing concern over violent pro-government attacks on demonstrators. Leopoldo Lopez, the opposition politician accused by the government of instigating the demonstrations, is in jail. Another critic of the Maduro government, retired Army General Angel Vivas, has emerged as a darling of the opposition after engaging in an armed standoff with persons he described as Cuban and Venezuelan henchmen who had come for him. Some feel the tipping point in Venezuela will be when enough Chavistas lose faith in the government and join the opposition. And although it's a very long shot, what happened in Ukraine just might happen in Venezuela. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Mexican authorities captured one of the top drug traffickers in the world in a weekend sting. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman is the head of Mexico's most powerful drug gang. He eluded authorities in both the U.S. and Mexico for years. Now the two countries are arguing over who will get justice first. El Chapo's cartel is responsible for 25% of all drugs entering the U.S., and prosecutors in California, New York, and Texas all want him in their jurisdiction. But it would be unusual for Mexican authorities to release such a high-profile suspect before first trying him there.
The 2014 Winter Olympics came to a close in Sochi Sunday. There were many surprising victories and disappointing defeats. Russia came away the big winner with 13 golds and 33 medals overall. The U.S. finished with 28 medals, including 9 gold. Team USA failed to take home medals in speed skating for the first time since 1984, and no individual figure skating medals for the first time since 1936. Norway won 11 gold medals and 26 overall, followed by Canada at 10 medals.
Gay couples in Chicago will be able to marry sooner than thought. A federal judge ruled Friday such couples don't have to wait until June to wed. That's when a state law approving gay marriage is set to take effect. The decision only applies to couples in Cook County, where Chicago is located.
A federal appeals court has ruled against the University of Notre Dame in a lawsuit over the Obamacare contraception mandate. Last year, Notre Dame filed suit claiming that forcing the university to offer birth control as part of its insurance plan violates the freedom of religion. But a Chicago appeals court upheld an earlier ruling that denied the school's request to delay penalties as the lawsuit moves forward. The Catholic University says the birth control mandate violates the church's teachings on abortion and life.
Now that it is legal to buy pot in Colorado, the State Department of Human Services is worried people on welfare could use their benefits to buy the drug. Records show 56 cash withdrawals were made with benefit cards at 19 marijuana shop ATMs last month. It totaled nearly $4,000. But the state still doesn't have concrete proof of a pot purchase.
I think if you're spending your welfare money to buy marijuana instead of diapers for your child, you probably have your priorities misplaced. They're good people, they're law-abiding people who like to get high once in a while. Nothing wrong with that.
Democrats in the state legislature introduced a bill to prevent ATM withdrawals inside marijuana dispensaries and strip clubs, but that bill was voted down.
In California, a mysterious polio-like illness is affecting a small number of children, causing severe weakness or rapid paralysis in one or more limbs. The Los Angeles Times reports state public health officials have been investigating the illness since a doctor requested polio testing for a child with severe paralysis in 2012. Since then, similar cases have sporadically been reported throughout the state. Investigating doctors say the illness is not polio.
And coming up, did you know the first missionary from America was a former slave? We're going to hear from this woman and her mission to educate African Americans about its mission history.
Well, February is Black History Month, so today we pause to celebrate the role of the African American church in America.
There's a call for Black Christians to reclaim their heritage on the mission field. We spoke with one African American missionary who is leading that push.
The richness of the African-American experience is heard in the very songs the choir sings on Sunday mornings. It's a richness that includes work far beyond the church walls.
We need to go back to our roots. I've been in mission many years, and when I started, the cry from other countries, other nations of people, they asked me, are there any African-American missionaries?
In fact, America's first missionary was George Liele. Liele was an emancipated slave who started the first African Baptist church in Savannah, Georgia, before heading to Jamaica in 1782 to start others.
I know that nothing good happens to anybody.
It's a history lesson missionary Brenda Stratton shares often. Her ministry, Message to the Nations, works to encourage more people to pursue missions work.
From a little girl, God called me into the field of mission. I didn't understand it because I thought a missionary was a little lady, go to Africa with a bun on her head, never to be seen again. So I didn't want that portion of it. When God called me, he told me, he said, I'm calling you to answer a slave woman's prayer. He said that she's crying for her children to be free, but really free. And I'm sending you, as a result of her prayers, to go and free people.
One of her latest projects is bringing electricity and a computer lab to a mud hut village in Ghana. Still, numbers show there's more work to be done. For example, a Christianity Today report showed the number of Black churches in the Southern Baptist Convention has grown more than 80% in the last decade to 3,400 U.S. congregations. But of the convention's 4,900 international missionaries, only 27 were Black.
The world knows that African Americans have suffered from slavery and other atrocities in life. And so they're interesting to know, especially now that there has become an African American president, how did God take you through some of the issues that you have, because we face some of the issues.
Stratton says sometimes the issues of poverty and struggle right outside the church's doors keep them from missions abroad. But
mission includes everything. God said to your Jerusalem, Judea, and the uttermost. He didn't say choose. He said to do it all. There's enough work for us all to do. We don't do one at the neglect of another.
And no one voice can replace another on the mission field.
The African American church became a place of refuge. It became, in some ways, an invented culture. And I don't say that disrespectfully. I believe it was a collaboration of the Holy Spirit, of God, with a wounded, rejected, orphaned people who found refuge in him.
That unique story is why YWAM's John Dawson works with Brenda Stratton. He encourages African Americans to take to the mission field and not to assume there's only work for them in Africa.
So we always say, for instance, the Koreans are the key to reaching Japan because they're similar North Asians. But the Japanese are fascinated with gospel music.
And even music can open the door to a mission field where the harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few.
And happy to report Brenda Stratton and John Dawson are already seeing their work make an impact. Message to the Nations and Youth with a Mission are experiencing steady increases in the numbers of African Americans pursuing international missions.
That's excellent. Up next, before he pulls out his scalpel, this surgeon calls for prayer. Surgeons who pray before you go under the knife. After this. Chattanooga, Tennessee is the most Bible-minded city in America. The American Bible Society and the Barna Group have come out with this year's ranking of the top 100 such cities. Their report surveys people on how often they read the Bible and their beliefs in its accuracy. After Chattanooga, Birmingham, Alabama, and Roanoke, Lynchburg, Virginia round out the top 3 most Bible-minded cities. The least, Providence, Rhode Island, and New Bedford, Massachusetts, followed by Albany, New York, and Boston.
Well, if you are facing an operation, you normally depend on your doctor for his surgical skills, and you'd look to your chaplain or your pastor for prayer.
That's right. Now, a growing number of surgeons are also praying with their patients before they operate. Paul Strand has that story.
It would be against his oath if Dallas heart surgeon Mark Poole didn't study every patient's case before operating. But he also feels it's against his calling if he doesn't at least offer to pray with them.
God is the great physician. He's the one that controls life and death.
Poole looks at the scalpel as his instrument during surgery.
In the same way, I see myself as an instrument in the hand of God. So I'm the one doing the operation, but he's the one guiding me.
We know about your love because you sent your son. We know about your power because you raised him from the dead.
And Poole wants to pray with his patients so they, too, can focus on that great physician.
When folks are facing medical emergencies, some people would say that's exactly the wrong time to pressure them about spiritual matters. But most patients say it actually takes much of the pressure off to bring God and prayer into their situations, and they appreciate it.
Take the case of Tom Pryor.
His risk of dying was probably 90% if he had no surgery. Even if you do an emergency surgery, the risk of dying is about 30%.
When Poole brought up praying,
I was slightly taken back for just a second, and then realizing my condition and the things that were going on, I thought it was probably a pretty good idea.
Pryor said Poole's prayers calmed and relaxed him. But was there a much bigger answer?
Yes, I am here.
Another praying surgeon, Rohan Jayaraja, says he understands a doctor offering to pray could make some patients uncomfortable and worried they can't refuse this powerful person.
To some degree, it can be like a teacher and a student, and you have to make sure that you're not overstepping your boundaries there or being inappropriate in that relationship.
The critics would say, well, there's a power differential. You're this powerful doctor, this poor patient's there helpless, and they feel like if they say no, you might not do your best during the surgery or something like that.
I think it's important to be sensitive to the fact that there are patients, number one, who may not be Christian, and number two, who may not believe in God at all.
Still, Jayaraja says he's witnessed God do so much at his hospital, he can't help but believe and pray.
I see the hand of God every day. I always say that with the work that I do, it's almost like every day is going to church.
Poole, too, has seen miracles. For instance, with a patient whose heart just stopped one day.
And I opened his chest up, and I was squeezing his heart. Nothing was happening, and I prayed, Lord, save this man. We kept working, and within a few minutes, his heart started to beat. And there was nothing I had done differently to it. It just started up. And so his life was saved. He went home. He's doing great.
But not everyone wants contact with this spiritual world.
I have had one patient that turned me down. I was there, we're about to start the surgery. I said, would you mind if I say a prayer with you? He said, I prefer not.
Still, both Poole and Jayaraja's spiritual work gets almost 100% support from their patients.
Oftentimes they'll say, that prayer meant the world to us.
That's how Russell Truitt felt after he had a heart attack, but waited about 3 weeks before going to the hospital.
Which is not the doctor's advice.
Poole did a double bypass on Truitt, accompanied by lots of prayers.
It was a huge relief. Being a Christian, whenever he asked that, it just took the world of pressure off my chest.
CBN News talked with Jimmy Mayfield just before Poole replaced a valve in the 78-year-old's heart.
It makes me feel better to know that the guy that's going to make the decisions when he gets in there has the Lord with him and has that peace.
We pray that his operation would go smoothly.
Jayaraja says some people may think they wouldn't want these kind of prayers, but they probably haven't faced a killer disease yet.
At the moment that you find out that you've got some horrible disease, cancer, whatever, I don't care what you believe in. If you actively don't believe in God, you believe in God at that moment.
Truitt encourages other doctors to follow Poole's and Jayaraja's example.
I think they would be surprised how many of their patients would appreciate it if they did do it.
1 Thessalonians says, pray without ceasing. And that definitely means pray before you go and operate.
These doctors are humble enough to admit they're not the great physician, but wise enough to say, since they know him, it's a pretty smart decision to bring him into their surgeries. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Texas Health Presbyterian in Dallas, Texas.
And finally this hour, meet a man who is turning to natural resources and recycling to help the homeless in his city.
That's right. Lee Kirsch is an Oregon architect whose inflatable homeless shelter has won him national recognition. It's not the first of its kind, but definitely the most innovative so far. Kirsch's prototype is a portable and inflatable shelter. It uses triangular panels to convert sunlight into heat to keep the occupants warm. In keeping with the goal of making use of resources at hand, Kirsch's business associate determined the shelters can be made from discarded sails, an ideal arrangement for a region popular with boating enthusiasts.
Say they bought 20 of these things, how wonderful would that be that you could create a camp, have a wonderful heat source, the sun, allow people to use these.
Kirsch hopes his design will be a useful shelter for the homeless of Eugene, Oregon. What an absolutely wonderful
It looks igloo-like.
Yes, it's amazing. God bless them.
Indeed.
Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Make it a marvelous Monday.